And you're good.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Kelly Saunders, Vice President of Policy and Engagement, and I am filling in for Brian today. And in a shocking twist, we have another filler inner today, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Jacob Manning. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager with the Small Business Association of Michigan. Before we get started today, Kelly, we want to welcome one of our new members today. Welcome to Lifeline Interventional Therapeutics and owners Dr. Gilbert Masterson and Dr. Julie Wilson. Welcome. So, Kelly, let's jump right into it today. Because last week was quite eventful in news here in Michigan. As many of our viewers know, we've been updating everyone on some ballot proposals that are currently being considered at the Board of Canvassers. Do we have any other updates on this?
We sure do. And I want to say I'm coming to you live from Oakland County today, and from a wonderful small business, and they're working behind me. So if you see people in the background, just know that they're letting me crash their office today. So in the form of the ballot proposals, we had talked to you about one called Invest in My Kids, and it is event essentially a graduated income tax to be imposed on folks that's called a fair share surcharge of 5%. Reminder that our income tax rate is 4.25%, and this was for $500,000 or above for a single filer and $1 million for joint filers. And then the fair share surcharge, as they're calling it, would be an additional 5%, which would make Michigan at 9.25% if this were to gain enough signatures and find its way to the ballot, which would make us one of the highest income tax rates in the country, in the top 10 for sure, not far behind California, New York, states like that. So, right, you had heard us talk about going to the Board of Canvassers, representing the small business voice because we know a lot of those filers do fall into the small business category. We know that people are aligned as sole proprietors, LLCs, and use the income tax itself in order to, as a pass through for their business. And so, right now, we are in this period after some initial language was rescinded to provide feedback in how the actual petition language is to be crafted. And so last week, the Board of Canvassers did meet, and there was a little bit of a protest on that rescindance that had happened prior to, and that was thwarted, luckily, by the Board of Canvassers saying, we're not taking this up again. It's been rescinded. We are now in public comment. You should have received a call to action from SBAM on Friday that asked folks to essentially fill out our call to action and tell the State Board of Canvassers how important it was to know for voters to see when they are looking at this petition that most of the people that would fall into these categories are small business owners. We know that from just IRS data collection that at minimum about two-thirds of people that file this income tax in the 500,000 and above and the million and above, tens of thousands of small business owners, two-thirds of them would be the ones paying this income tax, this surcharge or this graduated income tax. And so we felt it incumbent on ourselves to make sure that we did this call to action to inform the Board of Canvassers of that fact. And that's just one of the major pieces of the call to action that we were pointing out. So one, this is a small business tax. Like it is undeniably a small business tax. And so pointing that out in the language. The second piece is to make sure that it is worded as a graduated income tax. Right now, we know that the Constitution bans a graduated income tax. We know most people do not support a graduated income tax. And once you repeal this out of the Constitution, as we talked about before, it just opens up a can of worms to continue to essentially exacerbate this issue and make it higher and higher as we go. And then the third one is more mechanical in nature. This proposal specifically says that the funds will go to school districts, local school districts, but it doesn't define what it's used for. And essentially, when that pot of money goes into the school aid fund, the legislature gets to decide where that funding goes. And there is no tie to making sure that it goes to local school districts for classrooms. And so we really wanted to point out to the Board of Canvassers that these were things that needed to be included in the language to make sure that when people are contemplating signing this petition, that they know the facts of this specific ballot proposal. And so Brian Kelly, our president CEO, penned this letter, turned it in. And I know, Jacob, I don't know if we have real-time numbers that we can share with our viewership, but you always show up for us, and we could be not be more thankful. When I checked it this morning, it was hundreds of CTAs that had gone through to the Board of Canvassers, which is truly going to make the difference. And so, thank you so much for responding to that call to action. I think Jacob dropped it in the chat. And so if you have not done it yet, we would highly encourage you to do so. The public comment ends today at 5 p.m. And so we really need our small business owners to voice their concerns. We make it so easy for you. You just have to pop in your information and off and away it's sent. And you can forward that to anyone in your circles that would make would make a difference in their bottom line and how they operate their business. We have this small time frame to really speak into the Board of Canvassers. It's really imperative we do so. We do anticipate that there will be a meeting sometime next week to consider that petition language. And so the more information that we flood into the Board of Canvassers and the Secretary of State staff, these are things they have to take into consideration when they're essentially proposing language to go on the ballot, which will then be debated essentially in front of the State Board of Canvassers. Um, and we will plan to have representation there, not only from SBAM, but the coalition that we are a part of and have helped convene in order to make sure that we get the most fair language possible. So that is a wide-ranging synopsis, but there's a lot going on this front, and we'll make sure to keep you updated. We also encourage people to maybe attend the State Board of Canvassers meeting next week, and we'll make sure that you know when that is. So that is the update on that front, Jacob.
Yes, and you had asked about the specific number that we were at this time. And as you said, we have about 2 hours left in this public comment period. We're pushing about 400. We're right now at 390 individual submissions to the Board of Canvassers for public comment. That is quite a few comments for just that one body to receive, probably more than they're used to for a typical public comment period. But the more the merrier, as many people as they can hear that would like these things changed in the 100-word summary that'll appear at the top of the petition, the better, really. So moving forward, Kelly, for those keeping track, how many different ballot proposals are we really looking at for 2026 right now?
Yeah, there are 11 possible ballot proposals on the table for 2026, which is literally an obscene amount. I don't think I have ever seen, I'm not saying I'm old, but I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I've never seen this many come to the table. There are quite a few surrounding a constitutional amendment requiring people to show proof of citizenship when they vote. I want to say there's like three different that are on the table to be considered. So of the 11, three are kind of in that same vein. Um, there's the choice voting that we've talked about before that had already gone through the State Board of Canvassers with language. There's the Invest in My Kids graduated income tax proposal that we obviously are very interested in. There's an Axe My Tax, two petitions for that one in specific that are seeking to eliminate property taxes. And then there's also the Voters to Stop Pay Cuts, which is the repeal of the minimum wage deal that was struck by the governor and the legislature earlier this year that retained the tip credit and accelerated the minimum wage. Ironically, this specific proposal would decrease minimum wage. And so we have a vested interest in that as well. But that has gone already through the State Board of Canvassers process. And so the other ones are some local choice on, we covered this briefly when the energy package was going through the last legislative term that returns siting of solar, wind, and energy facilities to local governments that now the state has control over with that energy package. And so those are just a few to name. Again, there's often ballot proposals that are of similar topics. They just see kind of get out into the world to collect the signatures to see what they can get over the finish line. So it is a lot of ballot proposals, but a reminder, once they get through the State Board of Canvassers process, they literally have to collect, just short of 400, I think it's just short of 450,000 signatures in order to make the ballot. So unless you have a very sophisticated grassroots organic petition signature collection operation, or you're going to put some funding behind it, it is very difficult to achieve that number. But we've obviously seen ballot proposals land on the ballot. So sometimes it coalesces around a few in order to get them on, but we'll be watching them for sure. But the most important one is to right now watch what that wording is going to be next week for the invest in my kids or the graduated income tax verbiage that will be out in the world soon for people to consider signing. But people have a really hard time voting for ballot proposals when there's a lot on the ballot. It gets confusing, and people aren't quite sure what they're voting for. So we'll have to see what comes to fruition. And again, we'll be making sure to inform people as we go out through approach 2026 in the various dates that are time to vote on these respective things. So that's the update in ballot land.
Well, speaking of the 2026 ballot, we are going to jump into Election Watch 2026, as we often do. There was a big endorsement that really made some waves last week in the Michigan gubernatorial race. What can you tell us about that, Kelly?
Yes, I don't think I've ever seen an endorsement this early, and our friends at the Detroit Regional Chamber definitely came out quite early. Um, Detroit has a mayoral a race occurring, obviously with Mayor Duggan running for governor, and so there are some elections coming up for specifically city council and the mayoral race. And the Detroit Regional Chamber made an endorsement in the mayoral race, but at the same time made an endorsement for governor, and that is Mayor Mike Duggan of Detroit. Now, some would say this is not a surprise. He has been a very good friend to the Detroit Regional Chamber for a very long time. And I would put this in the category of why wait for the inevitable for them and come out and just make it very clear from the beginning that they will be supporting, essentially their mayor. So I think everyone, specifically in Lansing, was quite shocked last week at this early endorsement, but good for Mayor Duggan. It is a coveted endorsement. The Detroit Regional Chamber carries a lot of weight throughout the state and in elections specifically in Metro Detroit. And so we obviously make our own endorsements here at SBAM. We will not be making any endorsements this early in the process. But the Detroit Regional Chamber did not wait. And so, therefore, one of the largest endorsements, coveted endorsements in a gubernatorial race, check one for Mayor Duggan for as running for an independent, as an independent, excuse me, but scoring a major endorsement last week. So just a brief election 2026 watch today, but that was a pretty big one last week.
Absolutely. Well, switching gears here a little bit, Kelly, we've talked over the last couple of years several times, or really we've heard about this big CHIPS project that Governor Whitmer has been hunting for this Mundy Township site in Genesee County. There was a big announcement this last week. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we all know kind of the race for the chips factories around the country. We know that they're a major part of infrastructure, mainly been manufactured in China. And so there's a desire to bring these facilities back to the United States in order to become independent in this space. And Governor Whitmer has not been shy that she wants to be on the leading edge of that. And so there was a Mundy Township project, um, what she called Project Grit, that has been in the works for a long time. It was a pretty pricey um, incentive or investment to lure them here. One where I think it was 10,000 jobs that would potentially be brought here by SanDisk. And I think that's how you say it anyway. Apologies to them if it's not how you say it. But the cost of each job far outweighed what the actual wage and salary would be of the people that would be working in that facility. And so last week, the company said that they were pulling out and not seeking to land in Genesee any longer, and that they would be exploring other sites essentially throughout the US. And so a little bit of a blow to Governor Whitmer. I had to laugh a little bit. I know that she was pretty transparent. She called President Trump and said she really wanted this deal and had been upfront about that in her visits to the White House. He said that he would get her a better deal. So we'll see if he follows through on that and that they can work together in bringing new companies to Michigan. But as of right now, again, very disappointing, I think, for the governor's team. But we'll see what comes next. And I know Genesee, I think, was pretty excited about the potential of this, but also, um, hopefully there'll be another project that lands itself in Mundy that can be a good win for that community. But disappointing, I think, for Office of the Governor this past week.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's move on to another announcement that was made this week, and this one is quite unfortunate to us who have really been playing in the unemployment insurance space for a long time. Um, the Unemployment Insurance Agency shared in a press release last week something that appeared in our newsletter today. Made an announcement about some back payment that they would be issuing. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, everything I'm about to say, I just want to put into perspective that this is not the UIA's fault. They are implementing a law that was passed by the previous legislature. As you recall, there was a push towards the end of last year to increase weeks and benefits that we pushed against pretty hard. Stood by what we've always said, which is the trust fund needs to be restored to pre-pandemic levels. We need to root out fraud. And the department has taken those things very seriously. And we sit on a group called the Modernization Work Group, where we've worked through some of those process issues. But the trust fund is not back to where it was pre-pandemic level. Not to mention, we've seen a rise in unemployment in Michigan, specifically over the last year. It's been a disturbing trend. And so, the after the legislation has been reviewed and starting to be implemented, there was in the legislation that said that the law was enacted on January 1st of 2025. Therefore, those that were on unemployment January 1st until when the law essentially took effect on April 1st of no pun intended on the April Fools for 2025, that those that fell into that time window are essentially entitled to back payment. And so the UIA is in the process of or has reviewed cases in that time frame, and there are $34 million in back payments that they will be taking and distributing to claimants that were eligible for it January 1 through April 1st. And so I really do encourage you to read the article that was in our newsletter. I think Jacob did drop that in the chat. It will impact some of you. And so just to give you a little bit about the claims review that the UIA did go through. So there was the review of the time frame. As I said, claims that were filed prior to January 1 will not be reviewed, just to be clear about that, for a possible weekly benefit rate increase. And the UIA reviewed the claims between January 1st and April 1. And then notifications will be going out through my WAM accounts and then US mail with a monetary redetermination letter, excuse me, for that new weekly benefit amount. And then receiving funds will all be in one lump sum. So it will not be, thank the Lord, separate checks for every week that we missed, because that was the first thing that came to my mind. Unfortunately, let's please do this right. So um, that will happen. And then um, so the weeks though will not be redetermined. So the 20 to 26 that we went to, it still only applies to the benefit, not the weeks. So just to be clear on that front. But for future changes, to go over this again, on January 1, 2026, the maximum weekly benefit will go to $530 and increases to $614 on January 1, 2027. And then the amount for the dependent goes up to 1933 on January 1 of 2026 and increases to 26 on January 1, 2027. And then after 2027, it's based on inflation, how much things go up. And we've gone over this several times, but I think it's going to take a couple times of us saying it to go over it. We want to make you aware. So I will say, you as an employer, I'm very sorry for this. We certainly did all we could to make sure this didn't happen. And you probably will see some changes in your assessments because of this $34 million in back payments. So if you have any questions regarding this or you want to talk further about it, please do feel free to email or call Jacob and I, and we can go into more depth. But we do have a very good relationship with UIA. They did call us before the announcement went out, and we appreciated that so that we could properly put together the resources that you would need to understand the issue at hand. So, yes, the gift that keeps giving on the legislation that was passed last year, unfortunately. But again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions on that front.
So sticking with some news from unemployment, we just got numbers back for unemployment rates June of this year. What could you tell us about these recent numbers?
Yeah, so the seasonally adjusted jobless rate decreased by 0.1% over the month, going down to 5.3% during June, and that was released by DTMB. So the employment receded by 4,000 over the month, and the number of unemployed people fell by 6,000. So the Michigan's labor force was reduced by 9,000 in June. So a few notes. The Michigan's unemployment rate fell for the second consecutive month in June. The statewide total employment level edged down by 0.1%. And then Michigan's labor force rose 0.4% over the year. It is an increase to 1 full percentage point below the national total workforce expansion of 1.4%. And then the quarterly jobless rate was unchanged between the first and the second quarter of 2025, remaining at 5.4%. The thing that's still bothersome in this space is that the national average is just over 4%. And so Michigan continues to be on the leading edge of bad in this space. Somebody quote that, the leading edge of bad. Um, Unfortunately. And so when we're having conversations in Lansing about this, it is a constant from the story that we just talked about previous to this of $34 million in back payment. Our unemployment continuing to rise. People do choose to stay on unemployment longer when, weeks and rates are higher. And so we keep on having these conversations with legislators and department directors about we have to make sure people are getting into a field and the training that they need in order to get into the workforce. We know the jobs are in the market. We have more jobs than people in the state. And so we really need to focus in on what can we do to support people and get them into the workforce and making sure that we have a UIA system that holds people accountable. So, and that's on all fronts. That's employers and claimants alike. And so we'll continue to watch these things, but unfortunately, we continue to be one of the highest in the nation when it comes to unemployment. But edging down by 0.1% is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. While we're on the topic of numbers, Kelly, we had the Senate Fiscal Agency recently announced some revenue projections last week. What is this telling us?
Well, actually some good news. For the state anyway. The state brought in 3.3 billion in revenue in June, and the Senate Fiscal Agency, a very trusted agency, said in a recent report that's 84 million above projections for the month. So the fact that Michigan has taken in more money is really good. The monthly revenue report, the SFA said that the June revenue is an 8.3% increase from the same month last year. So we know that money coming into the state for our state functions is quite healthy. And so um, now the reason I really wanted to cover this today is that we still don't have a budget in Michigan. And I shouldn't laugh, but sometimes when things make me nervous, I do. And so we are still waiting on the House and Senate and the governor to come together and settle on not only a school aid budget, we know that school's going to be here before we know it, but also the budget as a whole. And so the July 1, obviously the deadline has passed. We know that, Jacob, I've been on the road today, so correct me if I'm wrong. We believe that the legislature is in this week, at least the House, correct? Or did that get canceled?
Um, they are currently scheduled to be in,
Okay,
but they
so,
were also currently scheduled to be in last week until
okay.
they weren't.
Well, hope is on the horizon, friends. We'll hope that they're in this week to have these substantial conversations surrounding the budget. So revenue looks healthy in Michigan. That is a really good sign. Now we have to make sure that these funds are distributed for the next year appropriately so that we can make sure government is open. And so good news all around, and hopefully our friends in the legislature and the governor can come together to get this budget settled.
Absolutely. To round things out, Kelly, we have been following some news recently about the Line 5 pipeline. What is happening on that front?
Yeah, so Enbridge has submitted their permit application with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and I didn't say it right, did I? Eagle. I always forget one of the acronyms, excuse me. In order to get their permit, obviously for the tunnel. And so we're in this period right now of public comment, where Eagle always takes public comment to understand whether people support it or don't support it. SBM has submitted a letter of support for the Line 5 tunnel. It's been a long-standing stance here at SBM. If you're interested in submitting your own public comment, please do make sure to do so. You can go to Eagle's website. We can also probably search for that and drop that in the chat. But this is a really critical time for the pipeline right now to get its permit in order to encase that in the straits and provide energy specifically to our UP friends. Um, and so we bring that up just as an FYI. I do want to cover one other thing, Jacob, that was not on our list today, and it actually happened while I was driving today from Lansing to Detroit. Um, Gallup does their annual poll on who is the most trusted voice in America, essentially. And once again, above everything, lawyers, doctors, think of any in every industry, small business again is number one. Small business owners have the number one trusted voice in their communities and around the country. And so we know this because we have the privilege of representing you every day. But once again, Gallup affirms that small business is the best business, best people. And so just want to affirm you and all you do today that people in your communities trust you, support you, and we do as well. So, Jacob, I think that's what we have today. It was a lot, but robust.
Yeah, definitely a lot of ground to cover. But we thank everybody for tuning in this week. And we hope everyone has a great week. Thanks for tuning in.
Have a great week, everybody.